Hello students, welcome to my YouTube channel. So in my last video I taught you all after Blenheim. Now let's start a new chapter in literature which is Hearts and Hands. Okay, let's start the video. Okay, so first let's introduce the author. This story is written by William Sidney Potter, better known by his pen name O. Henry. He was born on 11 September 1862. He was an American short story writer. Potter's works include The Gift of Maggie, The Duplicity of Hargreaves, and The Ransom of Red Chief. His stories are known for their surprise endings and witty narration. Potter also wrote poetry and non-fiction. So, this was the intro of the author. Now, before starting the story, let me tell you two lines about the story Hearts and Hands. Hearts and Hands is a gripping story by O. Henry in which he has blended reality and fantasy. The images O. Henry has created in his narration have contributed to the surprise ending, which is a typical trait in O. Henry's works. It's a fascinating story. It's one of the favorite stories because it gives you a sense of different human emotions with just three characters, and that's really the beauty of O. Henry's short stories. This particular story is set on the train and it talks about the exchange between two acquaintances. One is Miss Fairchild and the other is Mr. Easton. And the interesting part exactly comes at the end, and that's what makes the story that much fascinating. So let's start the story. At Denver. Denver is a town in USA. There was an influx of passengers into the coaches of the eastbound B&M Express, so which means that the train is starting from the west coast and going towards the east of America. In one coach, there sat a very pretty young woman dressed in elegant taste and surrounded by all the luxurious comforts of an experienced traveler. So many details are told about this particular traveler. The young woman, we are not given the name out. She was a pretty young woman dressed in elegant taste, which means in rich clothing and surrounded by all the comforts of an experienced traveler. That means she is the one who travels very often. So her body language looks like that. Among the newcomers were two young men, one of handsome presence with a bold, frank countenance and manner, the other a ruffled, glum-faced person, heavily built and roughly dressed. The two were handcuffed together. Now we come to know about the other two persons, Mr. Easton and the marshal. One of them was a handsome, good-looking, bold-mannered, and the other a ruffled, glum-faced person, heavily built and roughly dressed. As they passed down the aisle of the coach, they were handcuffed together. The only vacant seat offered was the reversed one facing the attractive young woman. Now here, the linked couple. Why the linked couple used? Because they were linked with the handcuff. Here the linked couple seated themselves. So, there, along with Miss Fairchild, are the linked couples, the two who were handcuffed together. The young woman's glance fell upon them with a distant, swift disinterest. She was not interested. She just looked at them. She was not interested. Then, with a lovely smile brightening her countenance and a tender pink tingling her rounded cheeks, she held out a little grey gloved hand. Now, in those times, the privileged women used to wear a glove because they don't wanted their hand to be touching the skin of any other fellow. So, then suddenly she recognized one of them and her expression changed and she held out her hand and it looked almost as though she was blushing. When she spoke, her voice, full, sweet, and deliberate, proclaimed that its owner was accustomed to speak and be heard. You know that when we speak, we expect that the people around you would listen to you. Okay, well, Mr. Easton, if you will make me speak first, I suppose I must. Don't you recognize old friends when you meet them in the West? So she says to Mr. Easton, well, let me speak first, and even asks him that doesn't you recognize old friends when you meet them? The young man roused himself sharply at the sound of her voice because he had not quite recognized her, seemed to struggle with a slight embarrassment which he threw off instantly, and then clasped her fingers with his left hand. With his left hand he held her grey gloved hand. It's Miss Fairchild. Now he finally recognizes her. It's Miss Fairchild, he said with a smile. I will ask you to excuse the other hand. It's otherwise engaged just at present. So he is extending his left hand, which is unusual. So he says that you must excuse me for this because my right hand is engaged at the moment. He slightly raised his right hand, bound at the wrist by the shining bracelet, to the left one of his companion. So the right one of Mr. Easton is handcuffed to the left hand of his companion. The glad look in the girl's eyes slowly changed to a bewildered horror. Bewildered means confusion. So as he shows his hand being handcuffed, Miss Fairchild reacts with confused fear. The glow faded from her cheeks, her lips parted in a vague, relaxing distress. Easton, with a little laugh, as if amused, was about to speak again when the other forestalled him. The glum-faced man had been watching the girl's countenance with veiled glances from his keen-shrewd eyes. Now the other person, Marshall, is described. So Easton was about to speak more, but Marshall now stops Mr. Easton. This person has been noticing the conversation that took place between Miss Fairchild and Mr. Easton, with his keen, shrewd eyes. This phrase and adjectives used for these three people are to be remembered nicely. You will excuse me for speaking, miss, but I see you are acquainted with the marshal here. So the marshal describes Mr. Easton as a marshal. If you will ask him to speak a word for me, when we get to the pen, he will do it. When refers to prison. He is taking me to Leavenworth prison. It's 7 years for counterfeiting. So this person tells that he has been taken to Leavenworth prison because he has been convicted 7 years of prison for counterfeiting. Oh, said the girl with a deep breath and returning color. So now Miss Fairchild gets back to her color. So that is what you are doing out here, a marshal. So now she tells other, okay, so you are the marshal and you are carrying this person who has to be imprisoned. My dear Miss Fairchild, said Easton calmly, I had to do something. Money has a way of taking wings unto itself. And you know, it takes money to keep step with our crowd in Washington. So now she wants to know that what does he do as an occupation, and she realized that he is a marshal. So he tells that, yes, I had to do something. I saw this opening in the West and, well, a marshalship isn't quite as high a position as that of ambassador, but, okay, this will be explained at the end of the story. Okay, the ambassador, said the girl warmly, doesn't call anymore. So she says that she is no longer anymore as a couple with the ambassador. He needn't ever have done so. You ought to know that. And so now you are one of these dashing Western heroes and you ride and shoot and go into all kind of dangers. So she is very fascinated by his profession and appreciates him. She says that you grow through all sorts of dangers. That's different from the Washington life. You have been missed from the old crowd. The girl's eyes, fascinated, went back, widening a little to rest upon the glittering handcuffs. Don't you worry about them, miss, said the other man. All marshals handcuff themselves to their prisoners to keep them from getting away. Mr. Easton knows his business. So as Miss Fairchild was looking at the handcuff very carefully, the marshal says that don't worry. He has put me attached to him so I don't escape out. Will you see again soon in Washington? Asked the girl. Not soon, I think, said Easton. My butterfly days are over, I fear. Now, butterfly days means roaming around like a butterfly in the society, etc. And he says his butterfly days are over. I love the West, said the girl irreverently. Her eyes were shining softly. She looked away out the car window. She began to speak truly and simply without the gloss of style and manner. Mama and I spent the summer in Denver. She went home a week ago because father was slightly ill. I could live and be happy in the West. I think the air here agrees with me. Money isn't everything, but people always misunderstand things and remain stupid. This paragraph is important and gives us a sense of understanding of what kind of person Miss Fairchild is. As we see above that she is probably not a sensitive daughter. Only because she loves the West. It shows an insensitive manner, the absence of taking care of parents. And by the last lines, but people always misunderstand things and remain stupid, we will come to know at the end of the story that it was Miss Fairchild. It was Miss Fairchild who was the most stupid because she was unable to understand what things are. This is the most ironic line of the entire story. Okay? Say, Mr. Marshall, ground the grum-faced man. This isn't quite fair. I'm needing a drink and haven't had a smoke all day. Haven't you talked long enough? Take me in the smoker room. Now, won't you? I'm half dead of a pipe. So this person says that you have spoken long enough. Now let us go to the smoker now and let me have a smoke. The bound travelers to their feet, Easton with the same slow smile on his face. Now they stood up to leave. I can't deny a petition for tobacco, he said lightly. It's the one friend of the unfortunate, that is tobacco. Goodbye, Miss Fairchild. Duty calls, you know. He held out his hand for a farewell, which would be the left hand. It's too bad you're not going east, she said, reclothing herself with manner and style. But you must go on to Leavenworth, I suppose. So she says it's not good that you are not going east, but for your duty, you should do that first. Yes, said Easton, I must go on to Leavenworth. The two men sidled down the easel into the smoker. The two passengers in a seat had heard most of the conversation, said one of them. That Marshall's a good sort of chap, they are saying to Easton. Some of these Western fellows are all right. Pretty young to hold an office like that, isn't he? Asked the other. Young? Exclaimed the first speaker. Why? Oh, didn't you catch on? Say, did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand? And that is the twist. The first passenger actually realized, Mr. Easton, who is a marshal. This is the other person who is the real marshal. We always handcuff a prisoner to his left hand, whereas Mr. Easton's right hand was handcuffed to the left hand of the marshal. So it's the marshal who is the real marshal and not the Easton. It was Mr. Easton who was counterfeited to the prison for 7 years for his crime. He says that his butterfly days are over because he is going to be inside jail for the next 7 years. So that's the story, Hearts and Hands. The hands of the title signify the handcuffed hands of both the Marshal and Mr. Easton. The hearts and hands, the story title, the hearts refers to the heart of Marshal because he is the one who is more kind-hearted in this case, so he is the one. The second heart reference is of course to Miss Fairchild, whose heart seems to have some kind of love and affection towards Mr. Easton. Despite being a linked couple, note there, despite being a linked couple, the Marshal and Easton are very different from each other, and in many aspects. One is a prisoner, other one is doing her duty as a marshal. It's too different, yeah? So here ends the story Hearts and Hands. I hope this story is clear to you all. If you have any queries, post your comments. I would surely try to help you all. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.